Good morning, officially. Welcome to PQ Talks, to this panel called Models of Collaboration, Performers and Scenographers. I'm Pavel Drábek with Barbara Příhodová, who is the curator. I'm the moderator of PQ Talks, and it's my wonderful and great pleasure to be welcoming you here to talk about models of collaboration. And we have a very international panel that came from the open call of practitioners, academics, researchers, theorists who are asking themselves about the modes of collaboration. We'll start with individual interventions, presentations, talks in the order as you can see. So from Jane Collins through Jocelyn, Dorita, Sarah, Charlotte, and Susan. And after about 35 minutes altogether of presentations, we'll have a discussion here as a panel. And for the last half an hour, we'll open up to questions to you. Is that okay with you? Okay, wonderful. The panel, there was the suggestion from the panel, so there is agreement on both sides. So in that case, I will hand over the microphone to our first speaker, that is Jane Collins.
Good morning, everybody. Brilliant. Brilliant that you've all got up to see us. That's great. Okay, I'm going to talk for 5 minutes, and given that we only have 5 minutes, and that was my suggestion, so I'm to blame if this is more difficult than anticipated. I want to take one of Barbara and Pavel's excellent questions that they put out on the call and just play with that for 5 minutes, because it's what prompted me to want to be part of this panel. And also, as I'm the first, it might give us a little bit of historical context. And the question was, what legacies of performer-scenography relationships have we inherited? What kind of hierarchies and assumptions of primacy and dominance have we inherited? Okay? And I think that's come up in some other panels as well. So, my first slide, is it up there? Yes, it is, good. Heine Goebbels, in The Aesthetics of Absence, relates an anecdote about rehearsals for this production, in which a famous visual artist enthusiastically tells a famous actor, "It's absolutely fantastic when you disappear." This is something you should never say to an actor. Certainly not a famous one. Looking back, the moment is something of an epiphany for Goebbels, as he realizes that it takes a visual artist to state the obvious. That despite all the avant-garde experiments of the 20th century, Western theatre and opera are still widely based on the classical concept of artistic presence, guided by notions of presence, of artistic experience, I should say, guided by notions of presence and intensity. I quote, "The focus of perception is on expressive performers, actors, singers, dancers, and instrumentalists, self-confident soloists, assured of their roles, characters, and bodies." That was 20 years ago. My epiphany came later in 2014 with this project. This was in India, and it engaged drawing, performance, and digital technology, a creative collaboration between fine art and theatre students at the University of Hyderabad. I wrote an article about this entitled "Against a Hierarchy of Expressive Means," as a kind of riposte to Adolf Appia, who in his seminal essay at the beginning of the 20th century argues for a hierarchy of means of expression on the stage. Appia, for all his radical and innovative experiments with space and light, still placed the performer firmly at the top of his hierarchy as the focus of perception. In the realization of their short performances at the end of this project, the presence of the majority of the fine art students through their actions and the way they engaged with materials and occupied space became enmeshed with the environment and the materials and the technology. The theatre students, on the other hand, accustomed to being the focus of perception, struggled to exert their authority in the face of all the other competing means of expression. In almost all cases of the works produced by the theatre students, they would have been more effective if they had not been in them. From a scenography perspective, it would seem designers have a tacit understanding of the agency and autonomy of objects and materials, but we haven't until recently conceptualized the relationship between actors and objects as one where inert things rely on being brought to life by human agents. Goebbels argues for a redistribution of presence, of the disappearance of the actor-performer from the center of attention, or even from the stage altogether, as in this piece, the production Stifter's Dinge. Or, and I think this is interesting, as a division of presence amongst all the elements involved, which is so eloquently manifested in the work of Chris Verdonk, for instance. In Thinking That Matters towards a post-anthropocentric approach to performance design, Micah Blaker describes the creation process of Chris Verdonk's End, in which the performers are elements of the landscape on stage, rather than the landscape being the backdrop to their actions and stories. And I know Jocelyn's going to elaborate on this in a minute. So it would appear that actor-performers do have a significant contribution to make when they are displaced from their elevated and central position. But will they ever accept not being center stage, wherever or whatever that stage may be? So my question is, how do we train performers to think scenographically? Or do we train scenographers to act? Or is the assured centrality of the human performer already on the way to being displaced? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jane. I would like to invite now Professor Jocelyn McKinney.
Thank you very much, Pavel. So, okay. That's my last slide, so, yeah. Okay, thanks. So, hi everyone. I'm the program leader for an MA in performance design at the University of Leeds, and it's been an important driver of the development of that program to question the traditional hierarchy of dramatic theatre, where we always start with a play, there are always human actors at its centre, those actors are bringing to life the things on stage, as we have tended to say. The design is a frame or a support in that kind of model. But in post-dramatic theatre, this hierarchy is questioned, is broken up, and design in post-dramatic forms might lead the development and realization of performance, not just be in service to a text and to actors. And Hans T. Suleiman uses Tadeusz Kantor as an example of an early example of post-dramatic theatre, talking about Kantor's use of non-trained actors with objects and the creation of those together into bio-objects. Very interested, I think, in the vulnerability and mutual dependency of actors and objects. Lehman says that hierarchy of dramatic theatre in Kantor's work is replaced by a dialogue between people and objects. The timer isn't showing on the display, by the way, so just so you know. Oh, now I've lost where I'm going with this. Okay, so my next slide. So last night, several of you will have heard Katrin Brack talking about her work and what she was saying about the things themselves. The things are themselves on stage. And interestingly, they often make a very challenging environment for actors. But her actors, or several of them, have talked very positively about this challenge. Wolfram Koch here is talking about it's like having another actor on stage, but also reflecting the unknowability, the unpredictability of that actor. I think the way that many of these actors who've worked with Katrin Brack talk about this is a sense of how the design is pushing them to feel liberated and go further than they might have done otherwise. And Chris Verdonk and his A Two Dogs Company work is very important here, I think, in this regard. Micah Blaker has written about this production. It's a post-apocalyptic, post-anthropocentric performance. Actors are elements of the stage landscape alongside a cast that includes an engine, a real fire, large amplifiers, and so on. So the human performers here are working alongside non-human elements through the development of the production. And they come to think about this as the production as a machine, and that's reflected in Marianne van Kerkhoven's book about the production called Listen to the Bloody Machine. And here are a couple of quotes from actors working in this production about how they had to adapt to the other things on stage. And I think particularly important is Johan Leesen's comment here about a shared responsibility. And it suggests that the machine of the production emerges through the collective creative efforts of everything on the stage, and how important listening is as part of that effort. Minty Donald's work, Minty Donald working with Nick Miller, her work is about performance with water and other non-human collaborators in this instance. Minty often uses the term more than human as well to talk about non-human materials, and I think that is to signal or to point out in case the idea of non-human inadvertently signals less than human. So yeah, it's quite common to hear more than human in that regard. So whereas Brack and Verdonk seem to stage dialogues between human objects, between humans and objects, I think what Donald is interested in is following more Karen Barad's idea of interaction. Amy Chan talked about this yesterday as part of the lighting panel. So in interaction, we're not talking about a dialogue between distinct things or objects, but a situation where matter of all kinds is part of the world's becoming. So to conclude then, I want to revise my first slide where I said dialogue instead of hierarchy, and replace it with this idea of the agency of assemblages. And use assemblage as a more viable model for the way in which scenography and actors can collaborate. But we also need to contend with the more than human as part of this. So humans in performance, scenographers, actors, audience, are all part of processes of materialization in the world, as well as in the theatre. And here's where we can think about how scenographers and actors can collaborate and make sure we account for the human, the more than human as part of that. Paul Ray's quote there really reminds us about how much we have focused on not just the centrality of the actor, but the centrality of the human. So I think decentering that as part of an effort to think about how scenographers and actors work together is important. And to me, it's about principles such as adopting a vulnerability, a humility, an openness, an attentiveness to what is already there, sensitivity to how things work on us at a bodily level, how it feels, as much as what it means or signifies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jocelyn McKinney. I would like to invite Dr. Dorita Hanna. Okay, Dorita, over to you.
Yeah, good.
We have orders from above.
Okay, can I have the first slide? No, that's not the first slide. Uh-oh. Can you turn it off and maybe go back? Oh, never mind. That's perfect. Great. Kia ora koutou. Ahlan wa sahlan. I just realised that I'm going to talk to you today about navigating, and the penny has just dropped that I'm talking about Pacific navigation, but coming from Lebanon, my Phoenician background is about navigating, so I realise now that this must be why I'm so interested in this in this particular idea, and its relationship to collaboration as a form of travelling together. So I'm going to talk to you about the Kupe Waka Odyssey, which opened the festival in 2018 in Wellington, the New Zealand Festival of the Arts. And it was a reaction to the 250 years since Captain Cook so-called discovered Aotearoa New Zealand. And so really it was very much a gesture at decolonising this myth of discovery. Yep. So I'll just go back. Can I go back one? No. Yes, I just wanted to say the collaborators are here. It was a co-direction between a designer, a navigator, and a director, who were also collaborating with Māori and Pacifica experts and artists. But I just want to acknowledge Kasha Pole, who was the designer, who actually worked with me on the Heart of PQ back in 2003 and came to New Zealand after that and ended up working on this project, and she did her master's at Damu. Oh, I'd like to see the, the video,
We're being
thanks.
guided by the stars now, and we're inspired by the great explorer of Kupe. It's an opportunity to celebrate the voyaging culture that's brought us all to this place.
This is a journey that all New Zealanders are part of. It's something that's so epic that I think only the New Zealand Festival would take it on. And we've created it, especially for Wellington. It's for this place. We're turning the Wellington waterfront into a massive stage. We've got waka coming from across the Pacific in Aotearoa, a haka of 1,000 strong men, women and children, choir of 250, and we're anticipating there's going to be a huge crowd down here for opening night.
It doesn't matter whatever way we all travelled here, we all belong. And we're all a part of one big canoe, he waka eke no.
So that's the great blue canoe to which Hotu is referring, which is also is the Pacific, which is also being called the Sea of Islands or the Liquid Continent. And the creative team, other than the co-directors, were the festival production team, Mana Whenua, that's the local tribes, the Waka Hauroa crew, which were the main sailing canoes that came from different Pacific islands, other waka that came from around New Zealand, waka being the canoes, the performers, the 1,000 haka dancers, and the 250 choir. And what was really critical to the whole event was this notion of hosting everybody, of having what they call manakitanga, which is a generosity, an acknowledgement of the time that was being put into creating this very ambitious event. So it was an event that was distributed across time and space. It began long before the festival started, and it finished long after it had ended. So it began with the journeying to the place. There was the opening, which I'm going to show you. Then there was a family day the following day where people could board the waka and talk to the the seafarers, and there was a community program as well during the festival, and then of course the return home. This is Kasia's original image that she made for the kind of idea of how to turn the harbour into a stage. Oh, and these are her images of Coupe standing on his great, on a stage with a waterfall so that he could be seen from around the harbour. Kura Maratini, who was the Coupe's wife, who actually named Aotearoa New Zealand, with a chorus of women, and the 250 people in the choir. And a star that came in, it was the guiding star that came in with the waka that had arrived from around the Pacific as well as from different parts of the country. 20,000 people turned up, they expected 5. So it became a bit of a challenge to find a place, to find good sight lines, but it was absolutely spectacular and aided by the drone footage. So I was streaming it on my phone. I was quite a way away, but I loved that sort of digital close-up and the distant view at the same time. But what was also interesting was that it was also delayed slightly in order to make sure that all the waka had arrived. There was very, very bad weather before that, so we were dealing with the elements as performers in this case. And then the event happened on a very sort of what turned out to be a very beautiful evening, particularly for Wellington, which is not known for its good weather. And then people had to find spaces on the harbour, which for me is very interesting. How do you design a harbour? For me, it's a kind of urban and architectural issue as well. How do you design a harbour in order for it to become a stage and for the spectators to become these self-organising people, organising themselves around the space in the city? So I just want to say that, you know, this collaboration in the end was with this creative team that initiated, developed and realised the project, also with Tangata Whenua, the people of the land, and Tangata Pacifica, the people of the Pacific. The cultural performers who were on land and sea, but also the elements itself, the weather and the ocean as a co-performer, and the public, which were a self-organising public. So this was a relational and responsive navigation, understanding all the factors. So I guess I'm very interested in how all these aspects about relational navigation, which is a very Pacific notion, not having instrumental navigational, mechanisms, but actually being able to navigate vast distances by understanding the time and place, the currents, the birds, etc., was key. And as Diane Lucer suggests, this renewed interest in Indigenous seafaring and navigation in Oceania through the performing arts goes beyond voyaging to address socio-political and aesthetic issues of belonging, affiliation, identification and agency in the Pacific. Kia ora, thank you.
Thank you very much, Dorita. Thank you very much. Wonderful. I would like now to invite to the stage Sara Francaira to talk about models of collaboration. Sara, over to you.
Thank you, Pavel. Hello, everyone. I'm here to propose an approach, but a practice too, of scenography as a way to decolonize staging and performance art creation, in the sense of establish a collaborative methodology between scenographers, directors, and performers that can subvert authorial and single models often kept as universal, actually too often. I'm not trained in post-colonial studies, even though I recognize their importance, but I deal with these issues every day in my practice. I deal with acts of colonization every day because I'm a scenographer, I'm a woman, and I'm Portuguese. I inherit the history of a country, the function of a society, models and practice which I often do not agree and which I have not defined. I try to make my position one of awareness, care and reflection, believing that a greater process of consideration and small gestures is a slow and important process of decolonization. And I also feel that this personal posture extends to my position as a scenographer and reflects especially on the models of collaboration. That's why I'm going to present you with a project, a very small one, with very limited resources, that I did with a young director, a woman director, which I think reflects this dimension and claims that the way to collaborate does not depend on scale, experience, or budget. Between 1961 and 1974, Portugal, under a dictatorial regime, conducted and sustained a war against what was called the Portuguese colonies. But these stories always have two sides. And for the Portuguese state, was called the Overseas War. For countries like Angola or Mozambique or Guinea-Bissau, was called the War of Liberation or the War of Independence. These years, not to mention all the others, were certainly extremely punishing for both sides. My generation grew up listening to grandparents recounting memories of the departure of young Portuguese, many young Portuguese who did not return to different fronts of this conflict. It is estimated that at the end of the war, around 145,000 soldiers were deployed. I'm sure that the stories on the other side won't be any different from a human point of view, but I don't know them yet because this war continues to be a taboo in the Portuguese society. To maintaining contact between these soldiers and their families, a women's organization called National Movement printed and distributed aerograms like those as a mean of communication. They consist on a single sheet, when folded over itself, closed, it correspond more or less to the size of a postcard, but they were excused from postage fee, which increased their demand and mass distribution. It is estimated that in these 13 years of war, circulate more than 300 million aerograms. Leonor Boesco, the creator and director of this performance, which was called "If I Die, I Want You to Know," this is one of the most common expressions at the end of these letters, worked from a collection of these aerograms and conceived a dramaturgy based exclusively on quoting pieces of this correspondence. The entire team was always aware that these letters, ranging from the personal to the political, are just a limited view of this reality. But we also know that the experience of this war needed to be addressed, questioned, thought. For this reason, we understand that it's important to give voice to the speeches, to the hard, to the fragile, also to the aggressive and disappointed, who, due to their political responsibility, should not be lost. At the beginning of the project, still not knowing yet could be on the stage, I was invited to think about, from a scenography point of view, of this challenge. The dramaturgy did not contain any idea to manage the space or the visual, because there wasn't exactly a story or any association of places. There were no characters either. The spirit of the work dictated that the performers were just interpreters reciting passage from letters. For performance design, this is a completely open space, and therefore an opportunity to install a visual and spatial device, not according with what was expected, but what could allow the text to travel and the gaze to speculate at the same time. This is also an opportunity to decolonize a form of collaboration that is often present to scenography, a main and superior aesthetic thought to which scenography must respond. When I create within a classic play or in a postmodern contemporary dramaturgy, I often feel that there is a pressure for scenography to be a colony of other territories. That is, a region maintained and controlled by them, and often still is. But what if it were otherwise? What if we allow this territory, the scenographic, a relation of greater equality, of consideration their difference and potential, allowing to have its own political diligence? In this way, when Leonor, the director, said to me, "So, how do you think you can do this? We put the performers on chairs, we sit them on a desk like reading the letters, we build the interior of a typical Portuguese house, or should we do it like an empty space just with the light above?" And my answer was, maybe we can do none of that. And this was the beginning of effective collaboration, of listening and enthusiasm, more attending to the experience of the plural and diverse responses. The performance took place in an art center in Lisbon, a very small one, whose presentation room has a uniqueness. It has an entrance on both sides that allows circulation in a corridor in front of the first row of the audience, which is right next to the stage. So it's used to the public to cross, go to the bathroom, and usually they cover the rest of the stage with a curtain. So my proposal grew in response to this routine, from the desire to give it visibility because it's bizarre, and from the wish to propose an alternative that does not sacralize the stage, not disrespect it, but renew it. So my proposal consists on a set of panels placed perpendicular to this passage, very close to the chairs, that force the public to circulate across the stage, around the panels, to reach to the other door, experience the space as an exhibition before the performance began. This proposal installed a relation with the room and with the materials that were different from the usual and divergent from what expected. I believe that this kind of logic, even before the performance began, is capable of installing a new awareness and attitude. The panels present there on the entrance side have image of aerograms, like the one you see, and in the other side, image chosen from the performer in rehearsals and readings. Oh, sorry. When the performance begins, the atmosphere changes only due to the action of the lights, but the panels stay, making the audience experience a scene split in half, with visible areas, others less visible, and others where only the actor voice can be heard. The panels are in fact propose a different theatrical experience in the room, and for each side of the audience, different. In a second moment, the actors move the panels and explore other occupations. And then, can you please put the video?
Capturamos 12 mulheres, 3 crianças, miúdo à mão. Destruímos perto de 100 palhotas. Levantámos uma armadilha com 2 granadas defensivas. Ouvi tiros dos turras passarem por cima da minha cabeça. Depois caímos numa emboscada e reagimos tão bem que os turras puseram-se em fuga.
As missões para nós são próprias. E quando se apanha algum turra é que é bonito. Orgulhe-se do seu filho por ter uma missão tão honrosa.
Matei um turra com 2 tiros na cabeça e um nas costas e não tive medo nem nojo. E além deste ainda conseguimos capturar mais 3. Como tem, nós, os paras, é o que se queira. Fazemos tudo sem o mínimo remorso.
Ainda há uns dias matámos mais 2 terroristas, ficando um deles completamente irreconhecível.
Okay, thank you.
E também trouxemos as célebres orelhas para
You can take the video.
o nosso comandante.
Thank you. So, for those who understand Portuguese, I'm so sorry. These are horrible words, extremely racist. But in fact, they are not ours. They are taken from some letters, and we thought that in order to change models, in order to not forget history, they must be told. So one of the ways we are able to put this difficult text on stage without commenting with words was through scenographical proposal. So at the same time that those words are heard, the sound and the visual overlapping of pieces of panel that are stripped and destroyed near the performance, who do not move, was no accidental. So in this moment of great tension, the panels are open at the bottom, and pieces with image fall from inside, or image that were, after all, pieces of a game, the ones that you see on the display in the beginning, and the panel becomes a transparent grid. This materiality is used to dress the performance in several environments and configurations, and the pieces remain loose on the floor, sometimes under the feet of the performance. And then, can you put the other video?
Salvador, llenar contigo, sem te ter ao pé de mim. De setembro de 1967.
É neste bloco que eu dia a dia meto a nossa separação.
Apesar disso ter uma grande influência no pessoal, que mesmo no mato, gosta de ter seu domingo. Há para aqui muito que fazer, mas também vai faltando disposição, sobretudo devido ao comandante, que indispõe toda a malta e não sabe de maneira alguma comandar um batalhão. Amigo meu...
Can you take the sound and leave the video? Thank you. So, these pieces that are on the floor are picked up by the performance and turned inside out. They're actually small folders which, when open and closed on the opposite way, transform the visible cover from the image to textured paintings with vibrant colors. The performers transform these pieces and fill the panels with them again in an improvisation game that builds different combinations every time. This happens when the text intensifies words of revolt, despair, discredit, saturation. Every day the performance ends differently. We never know if they can pull all the pieces or not, or what colors they put there. But from inside each folder, more sheets came out that spread across the room. Remember that the archives never have an ending. So, to me, to make an ending, I just want to say that performance design should be a challenge that, through scenic options, add, transform, and create tension in what is in progress around and in the whole performance. In this way, recognizing a different logic from the usual hierarchy, often explanation by the relation between the idea of author and authority, often colonial, may find strength as an action of cultural mediation, agent of commercial exchanges, negotiator of interests that converge, not unilateral decisions implemented. So this is the way that I believe that goes towards a richer form of scenography and a less colonial performance art world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Thank you very much. I would now like to invite Charlotte Östergaard.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm gonna go, I think it's nice to just say where I speak from. I am Danish. I think there is a slide coming up, maybe. I'm Danish. I call myself a costume designer. And I'm going to speak a little bit about some of the ideas I do in my artistic research that I do in Sweden, where I'm very focused on collaborative processes, or I would rather say co-creation. So it's a lot about process. So in my artistic research, I search for co-creative spaces where our mode of collaboration and our mode of production can contain tangible and intangible things, and acknowledging that these things can lead us in different or in kind of really unexpected directions. And for me, I use costume as a tool for searching for co-creative processes. And I'd like to say that for me, co-creation is, maybe I should take another, co-creation is for me an ambition to create shared collaborative spaces, or maybe you could also call them third spaces, where the crafted costume materialities that I do, and where I search or explore together, where what these things evokes in us individually, as well as between us collectively, is kind of in the center. And a third space where this kind of in-betweenness invites our creativity to flourish in ways that matters to us, that are kind of present in the situation. And by that, I, in a way, mean that I could enter the space with specific ideas of, I want to lead this in a direction, I want to direct it. But I'm actually more interested in figuring out how we can blur our roles so we can do this search together. So as you can see in this work, like this, yeah, that some of my costumes are rather spatial, and they somehow become more, to some extent, wearable spatial compositions. What is also visible is that through the crafted materialities, I'm quite present in the space. So as a creator of the costume materialities and as the host of the co-creative processes, I argue that my job is first and foremost to listen. I must listen open-mindedly. To the co-creative ideas that the materials evoke in my collaborators. I must silence my urge to direct in order to stretch myself towards my collaborators, as listening to the performer's embodied and imaginative experiences. Through listening to the performer's experiences, I meet the crafted costume materialities in new or other ways than while I crafted them. Through listening to the performer's experiences, I learned something about the costume materialities that I couldn't plan or predict while crafting. So when I host these co-creative processes, I argue that it's critical that I, the designer and researcher, open-mindedly listening to performers' experiences of specific costume materialities, and that we, through listening co-creatively, explore potentialities and challenges that are embedded in specific crafted costume materialities. In the co-creative processes, we must listen carefully to how specific costume materialities affect specific performers. And we must pay attention to which relationship emerge in order to explore the hidden performative potentialities and qualities that are embedded in the specific crafted materialities. I argue that the matterings or the worldings that materialize in the situations depends on those that are present in the situation. It depends on their longings, belongings, and our common interest in sharing and caring for the matterings and the worldings that are created in the situation. And what I'm suggesting is not very easy. It's filled with tons of dilemmas that I face every day. Actually, during breakfast, I had a long conversation with Susan of some of these dilemmas that I experienced. But what I do believe is in these kind of daring to share the dilemmas, daring to talk about it, we can maybe more open-mindedly negotiate with each other in careful or in caring ways when we collaborate. This is at least my hope and my aim for my research. Thank you very much for listening.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Charlotte. And now, Susan Marshall to talk.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So, if I can have the first slide, please. So I'm also a costume designer. I teach costume design, and I also teach history of fashion, so I come from different points of view. I want to talk to you today about a collaborative project that started really with my PhD studies, my research, into modular costume. Okay, so the idea of modular costume was I was trying to create a more horizontal rather than a hierarchical process. I created all these pieces that actually fit in one suitcase because I was working between the UK, Italy, where I live, and Denmark. So I needed to be able to transport everything around. So I created these different pieces that can be joined together in lots of different ways. There's no one way, there's no correct way. And then I invited single performers and groups of performers to come and play with the costumes. For me, it was very important, this idea of playing in order to create something. So I did different workshops, and then one workshop was with Tilde Knudsen in Asterianshus in Copenhagen. And we started to work together, and we found that we worked together so well that we're now on our third project together, always with modular costumes. So this was an interesting experiment, but it developed into more than an experiment because we've now developing different performances. The performance we created with the modular pieces, Tilde played, we worked together to create this production of Alice in Wonderland. It's without words, but it's sort of a dance piece with all the different costumes. And this has now been performed all around Europe, and quite successfully, and it's proved that actually the idea of modular costume can be taken out of a workshop experience and moved into a performance. So I think that it's interesting because there's a kind of a co-creativity, collaboration between the costume, between the body, between the performer, between the costume designer. So I think this is really, I create the pieces, so I suppose I kind of instigate something, but then they take on a life of their own. And I think this is also an interesting way that we could perhaps go forward. So these, after the production of Alice in Wonderland, we worked on a large production with a theatre school on the island of Møn, which is also in Denmark with the students, and I created a lot of different modular pieces, this time based on parts of nature that I observed in this park, because we did this performance outside in a park, and I got lots of different ideas from that, and then created modular pieces. And again, the students were given very much the free rein on what they did with these modular pieces, and it rather than being an exact kind of theatrical performance, they created these tableaux in different areas of the park afterwards. And this is my latest collaboration with her. It's actually really in the beginning stages. It's more experimental, but I became very, very interested in pockets for different reasons. Again, because I can use them as a modular structure, but also because they're quite significant in the history of women, because a lot of clothes for women now still don't even have a pocket. So these ones are based on an 18th century pannier pocket, which I really like the idea of, because apart from the lovely shape, they also were hidden under the skirts, and the skirts had a slit down the side, and the women could put their hands in the pockets and keep their little secrets in there, you know. So I really like this idea. So obviously my pockets here are transparent, so you can sort of half see the secrets and half not see the secrets, but you can, you know, you can keep things in there. They're performative in the way that actually you could put different things in the pockets, you could put notes in the pockets, you could describe them in different ways. So again, this is a project that we're working on now, but I'm really hoping that that this will be another example of collaboration between us. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all our 6 speakers for wonderful interventions, provocations, and presentations of projects. I would now like our panelists maybe to respond to some of the provocations that we have heard. Questions such as not to be afraid to confront the painful legacies, to the dilemmas, the hurtful pasts, opening up those discussions, or how do we move from a hierarchical towards a dialogical, towards an assemblage of practices? How do we decolonize? What is the role of listening? So several of our speakers have spoken about the importance of taking the objects, the presences, the things, and listening to them, not only to humans, but also to non-humans, and the importance of being open rather than being stuck within a certain legacy, within a certain craft with its own kind of delimitations. And so I wonder, how would you like to respond to what you have heard from others? Any takers?
Shall I start?
Yes, please. Jane, please start.
Is this mic on? Can you hear me? Okay, I think one of the things, I mean, I think all the presentations are kind of range of work and very different. I think one of the things we probably should establish quite early on is the difference between an actor and a performer, and the sliding scale between acting and performance, which, of course, Philip Auslander wrote about eloquently in the 90s, I think. Because I think there is a difference between a performer and an actor. And I suppose my interest particularly, because of my background, is to do with the actor. Because I think the actor does have a specific set of skills which he can bring to, she can bring to that negotiation with objects. I think dance is a different field because dance is abstraction, and so dancers are much more open to these ideas. But I think and one of the reasons I was interested in this panel is because I think we have a real problem in the West, particularly in the UK, with the way actors are trained, which is that they have no conception at all. They're not introduced to notions of space. They're not introduced to notions of their position in an overall landscape, which is what Jocelyn was talking about. But when they are, and when you see the work of people like Katrin, and we talk about Christopher Donk, but these are European examples. I think I want to know how we can elevate actors to work at that kind of, if you like, heightened level, where they are at one with the scenography, where they are kind of distributed across the scenography, without losing the particular set of skills that they bring. So that's my interest.
Could I directly respond to that? Because I think I do really agree with you, but I really experience the notion of the curriculum, actually in Scandinavia, where I'm based, is the one that is always falling upon. So someone like me that actually have a big experience with materiality, that I believe I have something to offer. I am trying my best, but the curriculum actually prevents me from entering those zones. So my question would be how we could decolonize kind of these curriculums, because I think there is a big, I think for me, there is some of the big issues actually happening.
If I may add to this, the point that you made in our discussion just before we started, that there is some kind of primacy of the text, that it seems that the written word is one of the legacies, the kind of logocentric focus is what in a way makes those distinctions and compartmentalizes people into this is an actor, this is a designer, and there seems to be a very strong rift, perhaps because of that curriculum. And Jocelyn, you said, well, I believe it's Shakespeare's to blame, isn't it, in the UK? Yeah.
You can't blame Shakespeare for everything,
Yeah.
although it would be quite nice to. I think it's also, just to respond, I think you're right, but I think the curriculum in the conservatoires, particularly in the UK, is very sort of, it's psychologically based. It's based on my own psychological motivations as a performer. And the notion of character and many things that act as a baggage that actors carry with them that I think constrains them from opening up to different ideas. My character wouldn't wear those shoes. My character wouldn't do this. You know, well, your character's doing it. You know, so get on with it. But that kind of, you know, and you know, don't put me in a costume where you can't see my face. All that sort of stuff. I think we do need to decolonize that history of training. There's a very good book by somebody called Bridget Escombe who talks about, she's talking about relationships to audiences, and she talks about rather than having objectives, because most acting training is still based on Stanislavski, it's based on 19th century principles, if you like, of what a person is, even, which is very kind of out of date. But this notion of my objective, what's driving me through, and if you take that away from an actor, they will say, why am I on stage, what am I doing? And Bridget talks about what she calls performance objectives, which I think ties in with what you're saying, is the machine, as being part of a machine. What's my performance objective in this larger thing which I'm part of? And if my performance objective is to be on the edge of the stage speaking very quietly, then that's what my objective is. So I have a reason. It's not driven by subjective notions of character. I'll be quiet now.
I know that, Susan, you were about to say something.
Oh, yeah, but it doesn't really tie in what Jane was saying at all. I was just wondering why we were all women on the panel talking about collaboration.
Yeah.
Can I just respond to that quickly?
Please.
I have a PhD student who wrote a wonderful dissertation. She says one of the problems about the British theatre is that you still believe that a man standing on an empty stage with a microphone or without will be speaking the truth.
Yeah, and I find it personally, I find it fascinating. Okay, I'm really glad that we are talking about collaboration. So, thank you very much, and that we are talking about listening, and it's been very kind, and it's been okay. Dorita, you were about to respond, weren't you?
I was going to say that there's something very interesting about this notion of listening and paying attention to the more than human and decentering the human with post-human theory. That's all tied up as well with the project of decolonization and I guess asking the white European male to, stand on the margins a little bit, or give a bit of space to others. And I just think it's a very interesting moment that we're in thinking about that. And what I'm very interested in, I'm now teaching architecture, but very much about performing grounds and how we have to really listen to the earth. And I think part of the reason we're in this huge state of crisis is because we haven't listened to the earth. I think that's quite interesting for all of us to do, including the performers, is to have a kind of an engagement in a way that's very relational, which again has to do a lot with indigenous knowledges or indigenous know-how. So that's, I think that idea of the sort of post-human moment that we're in, where we're looking at what that means, I think kind of, I'd like to say, I guess, because I don't think architecture feels a little marginalised in this PQ, do you know? And I'm just interested in the fact that I think if we think about it holistically, we've got to think about how the environment performs as well and being aware of that.
Thank you very much, Dorita. Jocelyn, yeah, there is a microphone.
Thanks. So yeah, I think I'm not as concerned as you are, Jane, about what do we do with these well-trained actors. I suppose I'm coming from the point of view of scenographic performance, which may or may not need a well-trained actor. You know, sometimes a non-trained performer, audiences and so on can be part of that. And I think that's the beauty of thinking about an assemblage, because it's whatever's there at the time, including the earth and the weather potentially, and a kind of, a sort of more a fluidity between who's performing, who's watching, who's contributing, what is contributing. So I think I feel more relaxed about the idea. I mean, I'm sure there are things that trained actors can do outside scenographic performance. Yeah. So because I feel like we need to uncouple ourselves from thinking that scenography is always about fulfilling a kind of mainstream production model of things that will end up in theatres. And that's been the liberating thing, I think, about expanded models of scenography, that it can happen in many different places and contexts and at different scales. And yeah, that's where I think the beauty of the assemblage kind of thinking comes in.
I take that point, but I do also think that actors, even within those contexts, have something to offer that we need to pay attention to, because I think sometimes a lot of scenographic performance does actually fall short of where it could be in terms of challenging stereotypes, or but because it's not actually utilizing the potential of what an actor who is fully kind of aware and conversant with those languages can offer. So I think I absolutely take that. I mean, but I would also say there's so much boring acting. I mean, with one of the things, there's so much acting, too much acting, the theatre generally will be revitalized if the things that you talk about, and the costumes that we're talking about, and the kind of listening and the kind of democracy that Dorita's talking about was kind of pushed a bit more into the mainstream, because I think it's kind of dead otherwise. And yes, we are at a moment, I agree completely, but I also think it's a big problem in drama schools at the moment for people of colour who are being forced into situations and a training which has no roots in their cultural perspectives and is problematic for them. A white European perspective is being enforced. So that's a kind of colonizing. As an actor, the first thing you're taught is where's the strongest position in the stage, How do you colonize the stage? Where do you stand so that you're the strongest person in the room? But sometimes being the weakest person in the room is the most interesting thing. And I think they have a lot of language that we could share in a scenographic context, which is why I agree, but I think there's ground there for this debate to be taken into the scenographic frame.
Do you think I could bring in the aspect of Sarah's point when she says that scenography sometimes feels as a colonial theory of colonial territory of other practices, as if it's only serving utilitarian. I think that's a legacy. I wonder if someone would like to expand on that provocation. Maybe not. Maybe not. Is it time now to open to the audience? Yes, wonderful. So could we please have the light in the audience? I will ask Izzy and Zhenya to take microphones. There is one more, Zhenya. There is one for you. And we have time for questions. I can see a hand up already. Okay, so Zhenya, please this one. And Izzy, there will be a second question up on that side. Okay. And if you could please introduce yourselves briefly.
Hi, I'm Chi. I'm a scenic design student at DePaul University in the United States. And I kind of have a question about the connection between non-human performers and decolonization and how bringing our environment into performance connects us better with the earth. So I just kind of want like opinions or comments on the connection between those two things.
Well, the first thing that you know, I'm part of the theatre and architecture working group for IFTR, and we're having a little plug here, having a one-day gathering on the 15th in the Veltrishny Palace, where we're talking about performance grounds. So we're very interested in starting with what place are we performing on? You know, and really being sensitive to that. And for me, in terms of my teaching in architecture, that comes first now. I tell the students the ground is not a line, you know, it's a very deep, there's a kind of depth of space, there's a kind of a whole, the biosphere that we're in, and thinking about that first and foremost, because that's the thing that we've kind of ignored for such a long time. So that's one thing that I'm very interested in, is that the more than human that's all around us, the minute we decenter ourselves, I think we can actually make much more interesting work, you know, but we can also maybe also attend to issues that we have to attend to very urgently.
Yes, what she said really, but what else was I going to say? Well, so yeah, it is about decentering, and it is about, see, the thing is, I don't think thinking about performance as an assemblage necessarily only applies to kind of new forms of performance or contemporary forms of performance. I think you could think about Victorian melodrama as an assemblage. But it is about a perspective on how you're reading that. Simon Shepherd's written a great book about theatre, body, pleasure. The title might not be those words, they might not be in that order, but they're something like that. And he says in that something like, the audience bring to their viewing of the work the rest of their spatial lives. I've totally mangled that, but it's to do with what is already sedimented in audience bodies about their particular experience of the world and of materials and of spaces and the way that conditions them politically, economically, and so on. And they bring that to everything, but particularly to the viewing of performance in this, you know, in this context. So it's not, I don't think I'm proposing something completely, something new as a phenomenon. I think it is to do with something about the way we could view how we are perceiving. I think we've overlooked it, we've underestimated how important that is in the way that we've read how theatre works. But yeah, but new forms I think help make that much more apparent. How that can be, those connections between decentering the human and decolonializing and kind of moving to the side, as Dorita was saying, and seeing what's already there, where is this place, what are these things that are already happening, you know, this temperature in this room, the feeling between us, what the walls are doing, yeah? It's all really important.
But isn't part of our sort of task or our role to kind of to destabilize those kind of normalizations of the view? So the viewers come with a certain set of expectations, and what we want to be doing is challenging those expectations, not reproducing them or representing them. And I mean, that was particular in the 19th century as well, when there were Africans were placed on stage and viewed in a certain way. So we are continually trying to change those perspectives and challenge what the audience brings with them, so they leave maybe, you know, they leave confused, amazed, or whatever, but they don't leave with all their preconceptions reinforced. I think that's one of the things that we want to be trying to kind of do. And that would be the star of the performance. But sorry, that could be, yes, at the side of the stage. It could be the leading man is kind of in a box and we never see him, you know, something, I don't know. But these just, you could get in a box, Pavel.
I'll do some practice. Yes. Izzy, please. Yeah.
Hi. Thank you so much for all of your presentations. My name is Tony. And I have been trained as a theater director, which is something that I'm reckoning with, how that term has been used and abused. And I was very curious about the term of navigator that was proposed and how that kind of relates to directors and directions and navigation and navigators. And I was very curious if you could expand a bit more on that. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, it's there is something very interesting about Pacific navigation because it's not instrumental in the way that European navigation has been. So for a long time, for example, Europe thought that Pacific Islanders accidentally found their way to New Zealand because they're kind of blown off course or whatever, you know. And then they actually, in 1976, there was a hokoela that proved that they know how to navigate without instrumentation. And the way that they do it is to listen, is to be very and see and just be very attuned to the environment. So in the Pacific, it's called tā-vā. Tā meaning time, vā meaning space, and it being very relational. So it's a really interesting concept that navigation has got to do with always being aware and putting yourself in relation to everything. And being able to not only see by the stars, but by the waves, the birds, the wind, all the different elements coming together and being so aware of that. And then if you can't see that, you're at night and you can't see the stars, you lie in the boat and you can feel the currents on your back. So I think in relation to direction, and it's nice that relationship between navigation and direction is this idea to be kind of constantly aware and responsive and negotiating relations around you, and not just relations to people, but relations to the environment and the weather and other things as well. So in Aotearoa, it's become quite a sort of way of thinking, really, that I've found very inspiring.
Okay, we have a question here in the middle.
Hi, my name is Cassie. I'm from Canada, and I just wanted to ask, we have a very hierarchical, rigid structure in our system, and specifically where I live. It's quite dangerous to go beyond the norm for a lot of theater companies, and I was wondering if you have any advice for your way of working in a system that doesn't necessarily work for that and moving forward.
Well, patience. Believing in yourself. I think the relation with the other, the listening, it's very important. In Portugal, I do agree with Jane, it's very difficult, especially in theater with actors. But the director makes all the difference. Of course, the director always is an actor, always has a school where the director is an actor. But I think it's the person that makes the difference. So I always have to do two jobs. One is my job as a scenographer, and the other is to find some partners in crime, you know, and these people make all the difference. And but I think the teaching is a problem. I think teaching should be able to give the actors that are supposed to be the future directors. I don't know, scenographers can be directors too, so that's not a problem, but give them tools, because sometimes they listen, but they are not, give them space to discover other things. I mean, I teach scenography, but my colleague in the other room that teach, like actors, performance, singing, they don't come to my class, but my students go to their class, and this is a problem.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We have a question up there.
Yeah, hello, my name is Francisca. I'm also a stage director, and it's very interesting to hear all of you. Thank you for this panel, because I'm actually working on an opera at the moment that doesn't have any live performers, so this was very useful. Thank you. My question relates to the previous question, because in my experience, when I wanted to work collaboratively with a set designer, a costume designer, or even a sound designer, usually the problem was contracting and how to actually have that person in the room with us making and collaborating. Do you have any practical tips for people who might not have budget to have a designer in the room? Like, how can we fight for decolonizing that navigation, as you mentioned before?
I think it's not very easy. I can see where I'm situated. Now there's beginning to come new people in the more leading artistic director positions in smaller theaters, and they are much more open-minded than the more classical structures. So this is not really an answer, but really a thing where there's a lot of problematics, I think, because I think you're pointing at something. We can find our people and do our independent projects, but when we are in the bigger structures, they kind of set the frame, and they are not as necessary as open for change. But I must say, where I am, I'm seeing small changes happening, where I become really happy, because those people are open for collaborations on other terms that are not only focused on a classical hierarchy, but if a group is interested in working other ways, there is an openness. But I think it takes time, and I think we need to find ways of sharing in our bigger community, also across countries, where things are emerging, where these small, so we can learn, basically. Learn from each other, learn from where it is. I would say there is one, I'm not going to name who it is, but there's one theater in Denmark that now has had the privilege of getting a lot of funding for working with collaborative processes, which is great, but I'm also thinking what they're reproducing is still the same structure. When I see the smaller theaters, they are actually doing the work, but they're not getting recognized. So I think there's a lot of dilemmas there. I can only talk from where I'm situated, because that is my main knowledge, obviously. So I think if everyone else answers it, there's probably different answers, but I think things are happening, and I believe it will happen, and I believe that we need to find each other so we dare to take up the challenge wherever we're situated. Sorry, it's not a very good, but I believe in it still. Yeah.
Can I just, maybe you could name drop and you could mention Bertolt Brecht, who always had designers in rehearsal, and just say you're following on his pattern. So just name drop. Yeah.
Can I just say too? I mean, there is a deep conservatism, I think, in the theatre. And the last project I worked on, I absolutely insisted. I said, I have to be in the reading. At the first reading, I was, and I was very surprised, because earlier, I'd been away for a long time from New Zealand. Earlier, I was always in the room, and things have become much more conservative, I found. So I absolutely insisted. But in relation to the question before that, I think it relates to that. And this is what I tell my students: you have to form your own. You have to insist. There's an old guard that, is not, I don't think is with the program anymore. And so I think it's just a case of forming alliances with people that you can share these kind of common ground with, and form your own kind of structures, people that question the status quo. And I know it's easier said than done, but I think it's really critical.
Thank you. We have a question up here, and then Rachel.
Hi. I'm a European man, so I speak the truth. So I'm Michael. I'm a scenographer, teacher, and a director, a writer, performer, bit of stage management. So my question really is about the future of educational structures and how we can maybe change things to make things better that we're all struggling with. Traditionally, there is a divide. Actors are trained in one kind of institution, sometimes a drama school or called different things, or conservatoire. Designers, scenographers are trained in an art school. And that's a kind of divide that's there. And I know that's breaking down, and there are universities that put them together. But what hasn't changed is that people go in through wanting to do a particular thing. So you go in as an actor, and you come out as an actor. And I'm wondering whether that badge, that name, that thing of deciding right from the start what you're going to be is problematic. And is there another kind of institution where maybe a group of people go in studying theatre and performance, and from that emerges different groups of people with different disciplines, rather than deciding that from the start? I'm proposing that as a potential model.
It's a good question, but you know, we've mentioned Heine Goebbels a couple of times, and his program in Gießen, which he's left now, but it was a very great example where people formed ensembles. And they didn't even call them companies, they're ensembles. And they'd shake it up. I'll be a director today, you be the designer, I'll be a performer. And then when they thought they were getting a bit flat, they would shake it up again and swap roles. So I think the Gießen School, for me, has always been an amazing example, but sadly, you know, somehow doesn't travel so well, or when he was invited to be a professor after he left Gießen, he said yes, so long as it can be, you know, horizontal and incorporate theory, and, you know, and the university said no. So, yeah, I think that there is a rigidity to the structures that are inherent to education that's stopping that from happening. But for me, Gießen under Goebbels was a shining example, and out of that came amazing ensembles that are still considered, you know, that are always shaking it up today.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Rachel, then Chris.
Hello, yeah, my name's Rachel Han, and I'm a cultural scenographer. We're here in Prague, in the home of Latina Magica, which historically could be described as a designer-led theatre, or at least a co-designer-led theatre. I wonder if the panel know of any contemporary designer-led theatres, and how can we get more of them? So in particular, I'm aware that in France, Philippe Quinel, he had a theatre that he was running in Paris, but doesn't do that anymore. I'm particularly looking at producing houses, those who have control of budget, and what steps could we do to have more designer-led theatres?
Well, I know of one, a little one, but it's still a significant one. There is this program in Denmark where a smaller place for every year runs an open call for people to run the place. Usually it has been directors, and the last pair was a director and a scenographer. This time it's 2 scenographers that are running the place, and that is significant. It's a really big change. It's not really named so much in Denmark, but I think it's significant that there are changes happening. It's not that some has to take control, but just the priority. So I think, but it's a really small, and they have for a year, it's only for a year, they have control of the budget, but it's better than nothing. It's leading some kind of way, new, I think, for me.
Yeah, I don't have a good answer actually, Rachel, because I can't. Are you thinking of like things on the scale of Philippe Ken? Yeah. Well, I mean, I suppose some of Chris Verdonk's work has made it onto big stages, hasn't it? So, I mean, in the UK, not so much in the UK. I think it's much more, as Charlotte was describing, much smaller companies, maybe who've got together at university level and have, you know, a number of people, some of whom will be a designer. And then I guess it's people like Louise and Louise Wilson and David Shearing, who are in the audience, and the work that they're doing. So we could ask them maybe, but I mean that's I think that's maybe not quite on the scale that although Louise has worked for National Theatre Wales.
But also, how could Louise, for instance, Louise Ann Wilson sitting over there, become the artistic director of the National Theatre of Wales?
Oh, I
so
see
that
what you mean. Okay.
Like you're at the pinnacle of the producing decisions
kind of,
that are being made, as distinct from being one of the people who's being produced.
Yeah. Okay.
Can I say one thing? It's David Shearing. Hello. Get on the board. Sit on a board for theatre. Yeah. There you go.
I think you do have the auteur, though, which is, in the end, it's really kind of the auteur who's sort of positioned a lot as the director. I'm thinking about Chris Verdonk, Robert Wilson, Robert Lepage, Romeo Castellucci, or blokes. But it's very interesting because someone like Ivo van Hove, for example, I don't believe he could do the work he's doing without his partner. Jan Versveld, I don't know how to say his surname properly, but I think it's absolutely predicated. The same with Baz Luhrmann. Baz Luhrmann's work is completely predicated on Catherine Martin. So, I think that's very interesting too, because somehow we have to have the singular, and I think that's the problem, is not being able to, we always want one person to turn to, rather than realizing how can we talk about ensembles, which again is why I think Rimini Protocol, Gob Squad, Showcase Beat Lamont, all the ones that have come out of Gießen are, confounding that.
Although, just to add, of course, Heine Goebbels himself is the complete auteur, so there's a kind of irony there.
Yeah, I just wonder whether that just leads to another hierarchy if that happens. Yeah. And I'm saying that from a point of view of a designer who would love to have control of everything, but just in case anyone wants.
Okay, we have one last very short question from Chris.
Hello, I'm Chris Moore, and I think I probably have to call myself a retired scenographer now. Anyway, thank you very much, first of all, for expanding our lexicon of being able to talk about the assemblage. And I'm particularly excited by the idea of collaborative navigation towards an assemblage. But we're actually getting round to the nitty-gritty now of how do you actually do it. Susan gave a terrific example, I think, of how a scenographer might co-create by taking into the rehearsal room objects and saying, let's do something with these, let's make some clothes with these, let's make some garments, let's see where we get to them. Jane put her finger on it, obviously talking about the traditional rehearsal situation, which is almost the psychiatrist's chair, where the director is the psychiatrist and the actors, because they resist doing anything about understanding the play until the day of the first day of rehearsal. So the rehearsal room becomes a very delicate psychological place, and they do not like other people going in there. The director is the person who can listen to the actor's deepest fears. So, given the fact that that may be the actor's situation, and the situation where the scenographer has to go in very often still on the first day of rehearsal and say, tough, this is what your clothes are going to look like because it takes 4 weeks to make them. This is your environment. This is your set because it takes 4 weeks to make it. What do we do? How does the scenographer actively work within that economic situation of the rehearsal room in order to facilitate navigation, in order to facilitate artistic collaboration?
Big question for zero time, but please, let's have the answers.
I think
responses.
A big problem is time, having enough time to collaborate, I think. And then for collaboration, I would say, in general, we need to respect of each other, respect of each other's opinions, openness to ideas, but a lot of time to be able to create together. And perhaps this is the problem, that we start the rehearsals and then that's the point where it starts. Perhaps it needs to start before that.
I think Catherine Brack talked about this because Jocelyn was telling me earlier, and I think if handled carefully, I think if actors do understand what their performance objectives are, they are very liberated by being able to work with materials and open and get off that terribly kind of restrictive training which they're given most of the time through psychological realism. And we are dealing with, I mean, that's the problem, is naturalism, which I think Craig called that blunt instrument of life, didn't he, or something like that. So these debates aren't new, as Chris probably better than anybody else knows, but going, you know, right back to Edward Gordon Craig and his marionettes, and get rid of the actor, and because, you know, and we seem to be actually moving towards that now in a different way. But I think time and patience and understanding where actors are coming from is a good step forward. Understanding where they're coming from. I don't think the problem is going to be solved overnight, because the structure of the industry doesn't accommodate that. But the more designers are in there in rehearsal, the longer time span that they're given, I think you gradually start to see this expansion and more interesting work on stage, which is the key thing, I think.
I wonder if this doesn't relate to this notion of eco-scenography, actually, because I think we make a lot of shit. We make, you know, at the time it's not, obviously, but after the show it turns to kind of crap, you know, like often thrown out or maybe recycled, but... And I wonder whether we need to kind of also radically rethink what the design process is in relation to that. Because the last project I worked on, again with the Auckland Theatre Company, I said immediately, I don't want to make stuff that ends up in the tip. And I think we should be saying, we are dedicated to a kind of eco-scenography. They looked at me like I was bonkers. And I ended up having to work really hard to get rid of to recycle the set, which went to the City Mission and Women's Refuge and places like that. But I think if we can rethink this and think, what are we making and how can we work with designers to make stuff or make a performance that ends up not ending up with trash, actually will radically rethink theatre. And that's why we need to, for me, that's one of the reasons why we absolutely need to be in the room.
Okay. Well, on that note, I'm aware of time. I know that there have been lots of questions, and I apologize for that, but we have now completed this. I would like to ask you to thank our fantastic panel of speakers.